So it says that the equal sun will kill our people, basically dealing with the conceptual baggage when someone assumes that Onyame is equal to God, Okomfo is equal to priest, Sunsum is equal to spirit, and how real meaning is lost in translation when these meanings are replaced with Eurasian concepts. Okay. When you talk about, when you hear the word Eurasian, it actually means people from Europe and Asia. Okay. So Dr. Obadele Kambon is seated and we're going straight into the topic. Good morning, Doc.
Machio.
Meje also. I will be to me Kasafo nyina I want to say.
You know when you
say the nyame adawma me was be.
No, I am. I feel now I am.
So now you can actually reach out to me on abibitumi.com. abibitumi.com. Go there, download the app, and let's get to learn about ourselves, because just like me struggling with the equal sign. Doc, what's wrong with the equal sign? That it has the power to kill Africans.
Well, why are you? So this is a very good question. I hope my mic is up because I'm hearing a little echo.
Yeah, your mic is up. This is it. Yeah, it's up.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about the equal sign will kill our people, it's basically this idea that when we put an equal sign between African concepts and Eurasian concepts, again, to even talk about Europe is a fiction, it's a figment of imagination, because if you look at the map, and anyone can do this right now, you will see that Europe and Asia is really just one landmass. To talk about Europe as though it's its own freestanding continent, and that's not done in many places in the world, that if you look at the map, you'll see Europe and Asia just one landmass. It would be like saying, I want Ghana to be a continent because I'm from Ghana, so therefore I'm from the continent of Ghana, then the rest of Africa is its own thing. So it's really just one landmass, but that's a sidebar. There's a quote that I want to give you from one of our esteemed African now ancestors, and his name is Babajedi Shemsu Jehuti. Babajedi Shemsu Jehuti. And in the quote he says, African champions must break the chain that links African ideas to European ones and listen to the voice of the ancestors without European interpreters. I'll come again. And again I quote, he says, African champions must break the chain that links African ideas to European ideas and listen to the voice of the ancestors without European interpreters. So basically what happens is they will come and say, okay, God. Now if you look at the etymology of the word God, it's related to words like Gothic, when they say Gothic architecture or Goth music or so forth and so on. But it refers to poured earth, it refers to mounds, basically mounds of dirt that these white people used to pray to. Now, because they would pray to these, mounds of dirt, now they come and then they'll say, oh, God equals Awurade Nyankopɔn. Now, what happens when they give us this concept of God? Well, the indigenous concept of Awurade Nyankopɔn, Awurade being the feminine aspect of the creator and Nyankopɔn being the masculine aspect of the creator. There are gold weights. Matter of fact, I have a gold weights chart that goes into them. I actually have that gold weight myself. But it shows that Awurade is represented as a triangle. You can picture this like the womb. Then Nyankopɔn is represented as a spiral. You can picture this as a sperm that's in the womb. And basically the idea is that to create, to be a creator, it requires both masculine and feminine aspects. So our concept of the creator is both feminine and masculine in complementary balance. However, there's this concept out of Eurasia of Manichean dualism. I'll say that again, Manichean dualism. And in that type of concept, you have one thing has to be good and its opposite has to be bad. And if I ask anyone, usually they can think very much like a Eurasian, anyone who's been through white schools and so forth and so on. So if I ask you between white and black, according to Eurasian thought, again the thought of Europe and Asia, which one is good and which one is bad between white and black, according to their thought? That's a question to you.
So which one is?
Which one is considered to be good and which one is considered to be bad by these white people? If they say between white and black, which is good, which is bad?
According to the white concept, white is good. bad is black, black is bad.
Exactly. So that's their concept. If you say between man and woman, which one is good, which one is bad?
Yeah, man is superior than woman.
And you can
And
find
actually, they say man is pure whilst woman is evil.
right? And you see this in the stories that they tell, where in their stories they'll say, okay, the fall of man came about because of a woman. This woman cut this man's hair and then brought the downfall. All these types of concepts are very much in line with white thought. Now, this is what we're talking about in terms of the Manichean dualism. One thing is good and its opposite is evil.
Okay.
And this is not in concert with African thought, which is based on complementary opposites.
Opposites.
So this is the idea that one thing completes the other one. So in order to create life, you require both masculine and feminine. And you see this in African concepts of the creator. So whether I'm going to Amen and Mut from ancient Kemet, whether I go to Arade Nyankopon from Akan, whether I go to Ata na Nyongmo,
From the gas.
exactly from the Gaz, whether if I'm talking about Mau Lisa, where Mau is actually the feminine and Lisa is the masculine. So people say, oh, Mau, that's God. But now, what's the concept of God? When they say God, if you read their biblical stories or whatever, God is a man, depicted as a man. If you go to the Sistine Chapel in Italy, if you go to all this, God is a white man sitting on the cloud who gets angry and mad if you do this. He'll make you burn an entire an eternal hellfire if you do this. So again, what this is going into is that their concept is an entirely different thing. They're saying this is a man. Our concept is masculine and feminine. But if we put this equal sign, what often happens is that it obliterates our indigenous concept of what this is. So if you look on the back of a trotro, they'll have written Aya Arade,
Yeah, right.
and then they'll have a picture of this white man,
Yeah.
which is Caesar Borgia, the illegitimate son of Pope Alexander VI, right? So if you say Arade, what in the world does that have to do with the feminine aspect of the creator, which is what our indigenous concept was? Again, the equal sign has killed our concept of what the creator is. Now, again, when we're talking about Manichean dualism, this is a trend that you find in Eurasian thought. And in their thought, one thing has to be good, the opposite has to be bad. So by the same token, if I said, well, this thing is good all the time, and if whites say, you know, man is good all the time and woman is bad all the time, it would be just as much of now I'm hearing it clearly from my own. If you look at the, Eurasian thought, they say, okay, well, man is good, woman is bad. Now imagine if I just flipped it and said, okay, well, now woman is always good and man is always bad. You're still trapped inside of this Manichean thought, as opposed to seeing, how the two interact. You understand how, both are necessary in order to get a complete whole. So this is what we're talking about. Now, if we're looking at a concept like spirit, so if you're learning Chi, if you're looking at a Chi dictionary, there will be like 10, 20, 30 words that they translate all of them as spirit. So if they say, okay, what's Sum Sum? They'll say, okay, Sum Sum is spirit. If you say, okay, what's Hom Hom? They'll say, okay, Hom Hom is spirit. If you say, what's this, what's that, what's Osamain? They'll say, Osamain is spirit. If you say, Nananom, what is that? Oh, that's spirit. Because basically there's a poverty of vocabulary in these Eurasian languages. Now, if you look at the etymology of spirit, spirit is coming from, it's the same as what you find in espiritu.
Spiritu, yeah, I've seen that word before.
Right, so this is the Latin.
Spiritu Mundi.
Very good. So if you look at this, it's coming with the same root as what you have in respiration, inspiration, perspiration, the spear. And what it's talking about is breath, right? Now, if you look at the Akan concept, breath is only one aspect of the human being. Again, you have this concept of the human being as multiple cells. So with that would be like Hom Hom, right? Because that's coming from the word Home, which is to breathe. So Hom Hom, that is the breath aspect. But then you have Sum Sum, which is Sum Musum, which is darkness inside of darkness. So this is the idea that when you go to sleep, your Sum Sum goes and interacts with other Sum Sum, right? And this is when you're having dreams, when you're in a dream state. So when you're asleep at night, you can picture your Sum Suma, this is now your shadow, that goes off and interacts with other ones and then comes back. And this is a similar concept that you had in ancient Kemet, that they would say the Ba, which is depicted as a bird that would fly away from you and could come back, at these times. So again, if you just translate, okay, well, Hom Hom, that's just spirit. If you say, okay, Sum Sum, that's just spirit. If If you say Osamang, that's your spirit, then it's like, all right, aren't we missing something? Because again, with the equal sign, what you're doing is that you're obliterating all the nuances, all the depth and understanding accumulated over millions and millions of years. African people have been on the planet for millions of years. So these understandings that we have are actually based on, observation. They're based on scientific method, all of these things to observe what happens when this happens. What happens when this happens? How do we understand this? Because again, you could look at Okra. You'll say, okay, Okra is just soul. Okay, well, it would be better even to just describe, well, what does Okra do? You say, okay, well, let me describe it. Okra is the aspect of the human being that comes from Onyame. You understand? It's
Someone is asking me on WhatsApp, who is your guest anyway? My guest is Dr. Obadele Kambon, a research fellow and a lecturer at the University of Ghana at the Institute of African Studies Department, and he is my guest every Monday. Doc, so would you say that the word God is not the same as Unyame?
This is exactly what I'm saying. And again, listen to what they're doing to describe it. They're saying that this is a man that lives off in the sky somewhere, who's mad and jealous and so forth and so on. So if you come to, well, what is the indigenous African concept of Radin Yankopon, of Onyame or Totoro Bonsu, of all of these concepts, each one is giving you a different perspective on what is the whole. So if you're going into, okay, Arade is feminine and Yankopon is masculine, how does that match up with when you're saying that God is a white male that lives in the sky on a cloud somewhere? It doesn't match up. So obviously, if they're giving you an equal sign, there's something going wrong there. And what ends up happening, so even if I ask people what's Arade, they will say, oh, it's that white man on the back of the trotro, that picture that you see on the back of the trotro. But again, that's the feminine aspect. I actually had one of our students in African studies who was talking about Mau. He was saying, okay, yeah, Mau is God and he did this and he did that and he did this. And Mau is actually the feminine aspect of the creator. Lisa is rather the masculine aspect. But again, if you grew up in Bibles and the Bible is saying Mau is this and Mau is that, then you're going to get this concept where Mau is going to be a man. It's going to be a white man in the sky who gets mad and angry and jealous about these things, who will burn you in eternal hellfire. And none of those are our indigenous concepts of a creator. And we can go down the line if we're saying, okay, Okomfo equals priest. What's missing when we do that? Now, if we look at the root word kom is the same when we say akom, it's the same root as when we say akom. If I say, for example, akomdeme. So you're talking about a void. There's an empty space here that needs to be filled. So when I say akomdeme, I'm saying that a void inside of me has taken hold of me. So what I do is I fill that void with food. I feel the akomdeme, right? Now let's look at that root kom. Now when we talk about akom, they refer to this as spirit possession. What this is that a person can train themselves so that the essence of what is inside of them can leave a void and allow another spiritual force to occupy that space, right? So if I'm talking about, okay, so now I'm getting possessed by Obosom, getting possessed by Abotia, or so forth and so on, that each one of these is an analogous situation. But if we just say, okay, Okomfo, that just means priest, then you lose that root. You understand? Where Okomfo is saying that someone who has that skill, who has been trained in order to allow their essence to go out, to have a void, to allow another spiritual aspect to come in order to relay messages to the community. You understand? So when a person gets possessed, this other being is able to talk about things that's going on in the community and really bridge the gap between the past, between the present, between the future, between the seen and the unseen, between the ancestors and those who are living. And when we even look at concepts such as when we say yi apaya, I think we spoke about this before. If you look at the root word pi, which is to break, to have a cleavage, right? You say something has split, apai, right? When you say yi apaya, what you're actually saying is remove. Yi is like miyiwe, right? So I'm removing something. So what you're doing is that you are removing the split between our realm and the ancestral realm, right? So when you pour libation, you're actually removing this, split, and that's what happens at Awukode, at Akwazide, all these festivals, is that it's basically a huge family reunion, those you can see and those you can't see. And this is the idea that even though a person passes on, they don't stop existing. It's just like when the sun sets. If I ask you, does the sun stop existing at nighttime? No. You just can't physically see it. by the same token, this is how we see, the ancestral realm. So we just say, oh, well, ancestor is spirit and this, that, and the third. But if we're not looking at what are the words actually telling you, because our worldview, our African deep thought is built into those words. But if we just say, okay, apaya is just libation. It's like, haven't you lost something in the translation if you just make this equal sign equivalency?
So if I get you, do you therefore mean that, well, those words actually goes a bit to mean the same thing, but just that we the African have more meanings to it? For example, the priest versus Okomfo. What is the root word of priest that will make it wrong for us to equate Okomfo to priest?
Very good. So again, you would have to look into the etymology of the word priest. We can see the use of the word priest, especially where we're coming from a Catholic type of situation where you have, all these males. They have restrictions. You're not allowed to sleep with women. You're supposed to do this. You're supposed to do that. You have archbishops. You have so forth and so on. But if you're looking at it, there's nothing in the word priest, even as a native speaker of English, and I'm a native speaker of English, if someone says priest, you would say, okay, does that mean to you someone who has a void and allows another spirit to take possession of them? It's not in the word. You understand? So there's nothing.
Practically, no. I think they do that.
So who is doing this?
Yeah, the priests. And today we call them pastors and stuff.
So this is an entirely different thing. So what happens when you don't understand the concept of this alien religion that has come to you? So what you have now are people, and matter of fact, we were having a discussion in African studies. We're saying what many of these people who are calling themselves priests are doing. If they were doing this in the 1400s or whatever, they would be burned alive. They would be burned at the stake. You understand?
Why?
Because what they're doing is not part of Christianity. You can't find in the Bible, okay, you're supposed to have this or bosom come in and drive out and do this and do that. So what they're doing is what we would actually refer to as syncretism. Syncretism. Now, what is syncretism? This is saying that you are blending your traditional spiritual systems with these alien spiritual systems. So if you look at, priest is coming from a Germanic origin. Is related to Dutch priester, German prester, based on ecclesiastical Latin presbyter, which is coming from elder. So this would be the equivalent of saying opinion.
Okay, so that's what we have, church elders.
So you have church elders, but again, the root word of priest
is elder.
Is elder. So if I say is Okomfo and opinion the same thing? No, right? So opinion is referring to someone who has gotten older, wenyini, right? Opinion. So if you're saying this, then all right, are you getting the full meaning of what Okomfo is? If you're just saying a word that means elder. So again, you have two different aspects to look at. One is etymological, origin. The other one is contemporary usage, right? And again, both of these can give us insight. So if you're asking someone in a contemporary situation, okay, what exactly is, a priest? Would you get a concept, a native speaker of English, would you get a concept, oh, this is someone who gets possessed by Obosom, right? Okay. There was, most people who would use the word priest don't even know what the word Obosom is.
But, in other hands, the priest in the Christian world also sometimes get hold of the Holy Spirit.
So again, this is what we're talking about. So if you are saying, all right, they're getting possessed with the Holy Spirit, according to these same priests, what the Okomfo is getting possessed with is demonic demons. You understand? So again, are you looking at it from your perspective as an African, or are you looking at it from their perspective? And then again, what is the Holy Spirit coming from? If you look at the origin of the Holy Trinity, right? It was Asar, Aset, and Heru. Now, when Eurasians decided that females are evil, then they had to remove the feminine aspect from it, because Asar is the father, the male, Aset is the feminine, the female, the mother, and then Heru is the child. So that was carried over directly into Catholicism, right? So you have the mother, that's still the Black Madonna, that's Mary, who's venerated among, the Catholics, because they basically copied and plagiarized it and kept that Trinity as it was. But as it stayed in Eurasian society, they decided that, we're from a place where the feminine has to be evil. You understand? This is where you get your Adam and Eve story. So if you're coming from a society, what they have to do is remove now that feminine aspect and replace it with the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, or the Holy Ghost. You understand? So again, if you're talking about a Holy Ghost, where's the feminine aspect of that? Whereas for the African situation, you can have an abosom who's female. So you can have, for example, Asiabina, right, which is one of the abosom in my mother's household. You understand? So again, where is the Holy Spirit in terms of the African concept? Again, it's this segmented Manichaean dualism where the masculine
Today,
is holy.
before we leave the studios, I want to ask you a question about. I'm told some African gods have been transferred to the U.S. Is that true?
Yes. Matter of fact, in my household, we grew up with all of these abosom, right? So, for example, my mother's main abosom is a Sujibi. Right, so this is out of the latte system. So most of hers, because she was trained through the latte system, most of them are coming from the latte system. And again, when you look at abosom, one of the major aspects that would define an entity as an abosom is their ability to possess people, right? If you can't possess, then you're not considered to be
in Ghana,
abosom.
when somebody is possessed with this spirit, Charlie, nobody want to go closer. We vilify them, we look at them as something else. But then let's go for let's go for a song from Akan. And when we are back, somebody has sent me a message that I want to ask you. He wants you to do just like you did with the priest and Okonfo, do the same thing with God and Onyame. So let's go for the musical break.
And never
What is that? You are shocked there.
Tune on to X-Light.
Taking your production to the next level. We're just getting started. Hey, Jared.
La 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 la. Bibelinya keni abako semu kontuni ene wi ase ya meni edom ne kusubo ni din ya wona pie ya wona ye shiranka wona ga funu ya wona che akaman asenso die ne ya hokan ba kufu a wona mufu ba fufu a wona tofa ti asini a wona mo din suni a wona madro konfuni a wona makom be mata bo kubo kom kane ho a ye ni dwem on kanya ho a ye sesi jem bra be hwe ye me pia waja akoje kra be hwe ti woni hwe ti fini na fo wan ko na ne se ya wa ye na so ti ya ko ni you make it from rap or how they sing. If I bet you name, I'm not in my betray. Did on it, job before the coin, and so not tidy in between. I'm not in Quande, I'm not your tidy effect, I'm not your self. Machine Joe, so walk on, I go back, so walk on, I go back, so walk on, I go back, side. Let's see. What's your control?
Solitaire. I'm not in Quande. I'm not yourself. I mean, you look good in that glass.
Thank you.
But I know a lot of things are going on in your mind. What is one question that you want to ask Doctor this morning?
Too much sauce. I'm just, it's now sinking down, like too much information. Yeah.
Okay, let's go on. Anoche, that's a song from Akan. And there's one song he said that Onyankopon the form the chine body pa. Nana di panin to me nyina ho ye, na nipa na emre and to discuss kakra fry and nipa ntina. I love that concept. That is to me that's his own concept of creation, how man became Okrati for. Anyway, Doc. Let's continue. So Mami Efiajiman says he wants you to juxtapose the etymology of Onyame and the etymology of that's the origin of the word God.
Very good.
Let's see.
Very good. So what I'm actually doing, I'm on Abibitumi as always, and I'm posting the etymology. I just posted the etymology of priest, and then I also have just posted the etymology of God. Now, if you look at God, it's coming from the Old English God, supreme being, deity, Christian God, from Proto-Germanic Gutan, right? And the sources are also Old Saxon, Old Frisian, Dutch God, Old High German Gott, Old Norse Gud, from Proto-Indo-European gut, that which is invoked, also traced to gru, that which is poured, as in to pour a libation, poured earth. You have kute gaya, poured earth. So again, if you look at these things, you're talking about, referring to a burial mound. So they worship these burial mounds. So they say, okay, this is what they're referring to. Now, most people who are using the word God don't know very much about German or Old High German or Norse or Nordic or whatever. But now picture if I showed up on the shores of Ghana one day, and you tell me, oh, here is Onyame. We have Nyamidria, so you see this as an Adinkra symbol. In ancient times, you would have where they would have a staff that have 3 prongs, and they would have a pot in the middle of those prongs, and they would refer to this as Nyamidria. And in the pot, they would have this type of kunkuma, this type of water that a person would use in order to purify themselves before going into the house or at other, auspicious occasions. So if you have this indigenous concept of Onyame, then someone says, okay, I know what you're talking about. I know the exact same thing. There's a word called dog, and that's the exact same thing as what you're talking about. Now, if I don't understand English, if I don't understand the word that you're saying, and I just take on face value that, okay, all of these things that I've been saying about Onyame, that equals the word dog, right? You can see how that could be a problem, because the word dog doesn't mean anything of the sort of what I've been talking about. But again, they've given me an equal sign. Now, maybe later on I would come to understand, oh, a dog is just this thing that's been barking, this 4-legged creature. That's not what I mean. You understand? But until that point, I would just take on face value that Onyame equals the word dog, because they told me, and why would they lie, right? Even though they have a history of lying, that we can say. Now, there are a few etymologies that are given for the word Onyame. If you look in Chris Dollar's dictionary of 1933, he traces it to the word nyam, as in animo nyam, right? Nyam, to shine, and Onyame as coming from the shining one.
Oh, glorious.
You could refer to it as a glorious. So all of these concepts of to shine, shrine, so forth and so on, and relate it that way. That's one possibility. But when we actually look at the day of Onyame is Miminida. If you look at the response, if someone is born on Saturday, they greet you Maachi, you can respond to them as Ya Amen, Ya Amen. If you look at this, you can see Amen in the names of the Supreme Being of very many African people. So again, Onyame's day is seen as Miminida. The female born on Onyame's day is Ama, right? And the full word is actually not Ama, that's a shortening of it. The full word is Amiminiwa. Amiminiwa, and it's shortened down to Ama.
That's supposed to be the name given to female born Saturday female bones.
Right, so that's the
not
full
just
word.
Ama.
Not just Ama. So Ama is actually a contraction of Amiminiwa. And you hear the same thing in Miminida, right? Kwamina. So all of these things have Amen, Amen, Amen. And then you have to go into historical context. What divinity is Amen? If you go to what we know as Kemet, the land of black people, if you go there right now, you can find the largest temple is called Ipetsut, and it is a temple to a divinity known as Amen, right? If you go to Dogon land, this is in Mali, their word for the supreme being is Ama, right? If you go to Rwanda,
That's in Mali.
That's in Mali, right? If you go to, and then we have Nyongma, again, it's related etymologically there as well. If you go to Rwanda, they have a language called Kinyarwanda, and they refer to the supreme being as Imana. So it's always Amen or Imen, you understand? So again, all throughout the African continent, they have this concept of Amen, Amen as the supreme being. So it's possible that even the word for to shine is related to the same Amen, Amen, because again, as we talked about before, on December 25th, when the sun rises, it shines into what they refer to as Jesa Jesaru, the sacred of all sacreds, and it would shine and illuminate this temple of Amen. So again, etymologically, but then if you look at the language Medu Neter, you will say, well, in that language itself, what is Amen? Amen refers to the hidden one, that which is unseen. And this is how Amen rose to prominence, among other things, is this idea that Amen is hidden in everything else. So if you say, oh, I have a great divinity called Bastet, you'll say, well, Amen is that hidden energy inside. And you can find this in the book of Coming Forth by Day, which we've discussed before, where you have some lines in it that says that Amen Ra, so this is Amen referring to the divinity of Upper Kemet, that's in the south, and then Ra, referring to the divinity of Lower Kemet, that's in the north. So the main center of Amen was Waset, but even you can trace it further south to what we now refer to as Nubia. The center for Ra was Ilnu, which they now refer to as, or the Greeks refer to as Heliopolis. It's now part of Cairo, right? And the only thing left standing is a Tekin, which is an obelisk there. Now, if you look at this combination of Amen and Ra is seen as being the totality, and it refers to Amen Ra as the one and only one who has no second, the one who is only one but has many arms. So when you look at the many arms, you'll see that anything else that you can refer to is just another manifestation of what is ultimately one being, which is Amen Ra. So these are some of the deep concepts that are in there. So you can see how this divinity rises to prominence even conceptually when we're referring to this is that which is hidden in everything else. So no matter how powerful you are, Amen is hidden inside of you as part of you.
This is deep as Bene is.
Much so.
Bene is really struggling to fit in. You fit in.
Yeah, I hope we can break it down, because the point is not to go over people's head, is to make people understand.
So Bene, what exactly is scattering your head? let me know so that Doc can maybe replay something for us.
No, you don't worry. I'm taking it step by step. I'm okay. I'll get there.
The boy is listening. They say you want me to play him tomorrow. I'll do that.
Okay.
From the Darko vibes. Okay. So Doc, what else is it that we Africans have been using the equal sign to just bury the deep meanings for we Africans?
You can look at basically any concept that we do this for. So we can say, for example, Nesut. Nesut, this is an indigenous word for, a traditional leader, a traditional ruler. Now, this is going to Medu Neter, right? Now, we can do this, and matter of fact, we're having a discussion.
For the benefit of some of our listeners who are listening for the first time, when you say Medu Neter, what do you mean?
So Medu Neter actually translates to divine or sacred words, right? This is what nowadays we refer to as hieroglyphics, ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics. It's actually a hieroglyphic system, so it's a misnomer to refer to the writing system as hieroglyphics, but that's a sidebar. So in this language, this is how they will refer to the ruler as Nesut. Now, if you come to English, matter of fact, we had a discussion because at the Institute of African Studies, we have a class on what they call chieftaincy, right? And I brought up how this is perhaps not the best thing to refer to as chieftaincy, because you say, well, what is a chief, right? Again, I look at this in the same way that I would look at when Eurasians are talking. They'll say, oh, we have houses, you Africans, you have huts. They'll say, we have forests, you Africans, you have jungles. That in all of these things, there's a built-in value judgment where whatever they're calling our thing is of a lower rank or lower order to what they have. You understand? So by the same token, they will say, okay, we have kings and emperors, and then you people, you have chiefs. But then you have to look at it, why are we just using this term chief without even critically analyzing it? Because chief is not an indigenous African word. So if it's coming from there, and it's again coming from the French, when you say chef, talk about the one who has the hat on, this is the head chef or whatever, you're saying this is the chief of whatever. So we would ask ourselves, why are we just adopting this terminology, which is actually an insult? So when Europeans, these Eurasians actually are talking, they're actually insulting us, but we just use these terms to say, oh, look at the hut over there. You can have an indigenous house that's bigger than a house in Europe, but they will still refer to yours as a hut, and they'll say, and what they have is a house. But again, these are issues that come up as long as we're speaking their languages, because built into their language are so many value judgments. Again, we talked about earlier, if they say white, in Eurasian language, white is supposed to be something good and black is supposed to be something bad. However, if you look at the Songhai language of Mali, anytime they want to refer to something as good or pure or fertile, they refer to it as being black. That's the adjective that they would use. It would be like if I want to say you're smart, I would say Kwabana Tuntum. And that would mean to everyone that this is a smart guy.
Bene Tuntum.
Bene Tuntum.
Bene is good.
Right. So let me give you actual examples. I'm giving that just, to illustrate. But in the Songhai language, they would have a saying, I know Hari Bibi, which translates to give me the black water. Now, when they say black water, they're not talking about the color of the water is actually black. They live on the Niger River, and on that river, when elders are crossing from one side to the other in a boat, when they get to the middle, this is a place where farm animals aren't drinking, people aren't bathing or washing. This is the purest part of the river, and that's the point in time where we would say, I know Hari Bibi, which means give me the black water, give me the purest water. You understand? So the concept
the word black actually means pure.
One of the many meanings.
Many meanings.
Right?
So give us more meaning.
Right? If they are talking about the sun is powerful, when the sun is at its highest point, we refer to it in Chi as Oijinaye, right? So this is when the sun is standing up at its height. They will refer to this as Wane Bibi, and they're the black sun. And the Bibi is the same thing in your middle name, Kwabena Bibini Teria. So the Bibini is coming from Bibi to be black. So when they want to say that the sun is powerful, they refer to this as the black sun. If they want to say that the ground is fertile, right, they will refer to it as Sadiza Bibi, and they refer to this as this is the fertile, the black earth. So anytime they want to say something is good, powerful, pure, great, whatever, and they actually have a story that they tell us, like an Anansi story about a hyena who wanted a sumain. This is what they refer to as a talisman. He wanted a sumain, so he went to the sumain maker, and he says, okay, I want a sumain, I want one that will last, and be powerful. So he said, you know what, give me a red one. Now the maker of the sumain was going to tell him what he should do, but because the hyena was already trying to tell him, he said, give me a red one. He said, okay, if that's what you want. So he gave it to him, he made it up, had the leather dyed it red, gave it to him. So not too long, the hyena was running around chasing after prey and water, so forth and so on. He came back and says, oh, the sumain you gave me, it hasn't lasted because look, it's already faded. It's, like pink or whatever, it's already faded. And he says, you know what, give me a green one. So the maker of the sumain was going to tell him which one to make, but he said, okay, if that's what you want. So he made him a green one. Again, that one faded. This went over again and again, and eventually, the hyena was exasperated. He says, you keep making, I said I want one that will last, but the ones you make, they keep fading out. He says, if only you would have taken time to listen instead of being so choosy, I would have told you that you should get one that is BB, right? BB. A black one. Because at the end, all the colors put together, that is completion, that is perfection, that is what is black. So, he gave him a black one, and that was the one that was able to last. And again, this is, one of the proverbs that they have. They say, if you want a suman, if you want a talisman that will last, make sure that it is black, right? Now, this is very much in alignment with the concept in Medu Neter and ancient Kemet, the land of black people, what we now refer to as ancient Egypt. The people themselves never referred to their own land as, I'm living in ancient Egypt. Their name for the land was Kemet, which means land of black people. It's the same thing as saying Abibi mine. And they referred to themselves as Kemetiu, which is the same thing as saying Abibi 4. And again, the root is the same Bibi that we're talking about here. So again, this is an indigenous African concept of what blackness is. But now, what if you take these white concepts where anything black is supposed to be bad and then say, okay, that's the same thing as Obibini? You understand? You can even see that perhaps this has been the influence. If you refer to someone as Okra Brifo, then you're referring to someone who has a soul that has been blackened. So we're still using the same word Bibi, but now the concept has been clearly influenced by a non-African concept, because you have to go all the way to the inland to people who haven't been influenced by these Eurasians in order to get a concept of Bibi as being powerful. But once you come to the south, to the coast, we're still using the word, but it's perhaps not, it doesn't have all of those positive connotations that it certainly has further inland.
Can we therefore say that these non-inland Africans, because the white were only interested in coastal lands like the west of Africa, where we have the sea all around, so they were not that affected, and their linguistics that never changed? For example, I was at TV3 yesterday, and we were having a chat, and I told some boys there that they should look at the way they call the white man in their language and tell me the meaning. And it turned out to be the way the Akans refer to him as Abroni. You understand? And we ended up saying that if we had taken our linguistics serious, we would not even be here thinking about who the white man is, to go into deep to know the meaning of Abro, to know that the white man is a wicked man. That's how our ancestors called him. So would you say that had effect on the southern African people?
I'll deal with this in parts. One way to look at this is look at the food, right? Look at the food. I'll come back to the linguistic part, but I want us to look at the food very briefly.
The food we eat?
The food we eat. So if you look at the south of Ghana, almost all of the staple foods are foreign foods. All the things that we consider to be traditional foods here in the south, almost all of them are foreign foods. For example, maize is not indigenous to Africa. Maize is actually indigenous to Central and Southern America, right? So this is, we have the Mayans who have maize chips and so forth and so on. Meanwhile, we're here eating, kinke, right, dokono or banku or whatever, all these things that have maize in them, and we're seeing them as traditional foods, but none of them are traditional. The other thing, cassava, is also indigenous to Central America, right? So there they call it manioc. Here we call it cassava or banchi or so forth and so on. So if you look at these types of things, we'll say, oh, well, I'm eating this food, it's traditional, but actually it's not traditional at all, that this is a recent import that the Portuguese or whoever brought to the shores. We can look again at, fufu. So plantain is not indigenous to Africa, it's actually indigenous to southeastern Eurasia, right? Also the cassava we've already mentioned. So the things that we eat now, we see as traditional, but you have to ask yourself, traditional since when? Whereas if you go to the north of Ghana, they're eating things like millet, which is indigenous African food, meaning it was domesticated by African people thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago. If you go there, you'll see that they're eating sorghum. You'll see they're eating baobab leaf salts, all these things. So when I went to Mali, the food is entirely different. They're eating the beans that we refer to as Bambara beans. When you're saying Bambara, the people there are called Bambara people, right? It means I reject your God, Bambara. In their language,
That's the meaning.
That's their meaning of those people. In their language, they call it Bamanakan. So you're saying I'm eating Bambara beans. You're saying I'm eating the beans of those people, because this is one of the indigenous foods that we have. Also, when we say kokone edria, you're talking about the bean, the red. That's the beans at least are indigenous. The plantain is not indigenous, but what you have is a combination of what's indigenous to us. And this is one of the first domesticated foods. Now, I'll tell you something. When I went up to the funeral of the Asante Hema, that I went to the funeral and we were looking for something to eat. And there were people who were serving fufu. And me, I asked for beans. And the guy there said, I know they are pizza for Adriane. Pizza for Adriane. So pizza for the people who eat pizza. He's saying, basically this is his way of saying this is foreign people's food. What are you? We're here at Asante, we're eating fufu, and here you go asking for beans. Now look at how jacked up, messed up our concept is. So what he's eating is actually the foreign thing. I'm asking for what's indigenous, but because the Asante people say, oh, we're eating fufu, this is our traditional food. If you don't have this background, you don't know which one is from here. So the thing that's indigenous you see as foreign, the thing that's foreign you see as indigenous, right?
Upside down, the tree has the leaves in the ground and the root in the air.
Exactly, because again we were talking.
That's tilting towards death.
Exactly. So again, we've talked about that issue as well, because the very first map in the history of the world is called the Turin Papyrus map, more appropriately called the Amen Nakht map, because that was the scribe who made that map. And we're talking about 3,160 years ago or so. Now, in this map, it's a south-up map, right? So this means the people who invented map making always put south at the top of the map. So when you look at modern-day maps that Eurasians have created, again, Europe and Asia is just one thing, they put north at the map. They want to see themselves as the top, at the center, and so forth and so on. So again, this is showing us that our whole orientation, our whole perspective, our whole worldview is upside down in so many ways. So I was giving you, some of this in terms of the foodstuffs, but you can even see it in the words that we use. So when we say efre, you're talking about a melon. But now when you say bofre, you're saying a foreign version of this melon, right? Odie, that's a word for yam. In Equapium, they say odie. Or odie, that's a word for yam. And there are many, many types. So if you go to like the dictionaries that were written in the 1800s, you'll see that, or in the early 1900s, you'll see they have so many words for yam. It's not just bayre, but you have odie. So now when you say brodie, you're saying a foreign version of odie. So whatever is the second part is what's indigenous, and when you're saying the bro in front, you're saying this is a foreign version of this indigenous thing. Again, we can look at we have abe. So abe is indigenous. This is a palm tree, abe. So now what's the foreign version of the palm tree?
Is it a date palm tree?
Think in tree. Think in the tree language.
Kube.
No.
Oh, big is coconut.
Yeah.
Abrobe. So just add bro in front of it, and then you get a foreign version of this.
Whoa.
Abrobe.
Whoa. Like the word abro is still being used, but we are not even thinking about it.
Right. And this is where you have, to some degree, matter of fact, we had a bit of a debate about the origin of the word obroni. We have some people saying it's coming from abro, which is to be wicked. You have other people say it's coming from bro, which is just horizon. For me, I don't think it's an either or thing. Again, if you can think complementary, that you can have it such where it can be this innocuous, it just means horizon. At the same time, it can also mean we're referring to these wicked foreign people. And the reason I say that is because you have a lot of plays on words where you would have something like, as I was learning Ayan, this is where you learn to drum of the Atumpan, that you have so many proverbs and sayings that are on the Ayan. Where they say, Kom kontiba jesi akwa, kom kontiba nyawa efri adjine. So you're saying that Kom kontiba, this is the tadpole named jesi akwa. That if the tadpole dies, it's coming from adjine.
The mad fish.
You can think of it as mudfish, or you can think about it as this. Right, the thoughts, because it wasn't thinking well enough to avoid the mudfish. So it doesn't have to be either or. It's a play on words so that you can think about it like this. There's another proverb, and it translates to when this mudfish or catfish, as some say, when it's fresh, if you don't bend it at that time, you'll see the smoked fish in the market, right? And they're bent and then they smoke them. So they're saying when it's fresh, if you don't bend it at that time, later on, let's say that you smoked it, it's dried out now, it's flat, and now you try to bend it, what will happen?
You break it.
It will break. And this is a double meaning, because one, the surface meaning is talking about just the mudfish, if you don't do it at that time. But then also,
second one is talking about the brain.
Exactly.
Actually, if you give birth to a child and you want him or her to think a certain way, you don't start early.
Right. When
it grows up, you can, as the Romans say, give me a child at 4. When he's 40, you can take him back.
Right. So again, you can't shape them in that same way. And this is the issue that we have. We have 40-year-olds, 50-years-olds who don't learn about African thought, and now you're trying to tell them about it. They say, no, just give me my white Jesus, right? They can't think outside of that box anymore. So again, it's not necessarily either or that abroad only has to mean wicked or it only has to mean foreign. Because again, when we're saying bofre, we're not saying a wicked melon. We're not saying a wicked palm tree. We're not saying wicked this, wicked that. We're just saying a foreign version of this. So when we're looking at obroni in the singular, it's coming from bro, right? Obroni. So that one, you can see it like that. But now when we put it in the plural, abrofo, that you can look at it like that. If you look at the language itself, abofo, that when you're actually saying a wicked person, you shorten it to bo. Right, abofo, to say this is a wicked person. But again, because the language is malleable, that you can say, oh, I'm just saying something innocuous, but I can have in the back of my mind this type of concept, because you can see, yevu, and everywhere they're saying something like tricky dog or something like this. You find in other languages that they have built in that these are wicked, these are so forth and so on. But again, it doesn't have to be either or. If we can start thinking in terms of complementary opposites. Instead of this Manichean dualism. And this is the main impact that Eurasian thought has had on us, that this is this and the opposite has to be this thing, right? Black is bad and white is good, or so forth and so on. And again, we get trapped into this, and this is the way they get that thought into your head is by saying God and the devil, right? And we've talked about this before, that as soon as they can get you to think on those terms, they've already got you. You may still have black skin, but you are now thinking in the trends of how Eurasians think, where one thing is good and its opposite is evil, as opposed to the Akan concept would be the Osansase, the Nyame aye nyina, which is the kite.
Osansase Nyame aye nyina.
Right. So this is
Osansa is the eagle, right?
Kite, right? Kite. If you look it up. Yeah. So when you say a kite that you fly, you actually get the word kite coming from the bird.
Has this feathers. Okay.
Exactly. It looks something like a hawk, right? So it's saying that this bird that has this vision, it can see everything. It's looking down, and would have saying that
And he's telling the earthly people that he has got a message from God, and whatever God has created is good.
not God, Onyame.
Onyame.
This is the whole point of the program.
So we don't have any God. It's Nyami. Or
So
God
like
is there.
we as Africans, if we use God, from what I've learned from Doug, if we use the word God, it's limiting, isn't it?
You're referring to a white man in the sky who is jealous and vengeful and will burn you in eternal hell if you don't do what he says. This white man, and you can actually go to Italy and see the depictions at the top of the Sistine Chapel. They have this white man in the sky. You understand? And this is their idea. So if they're saying this is what God is, now you come to the indigenous African concept. Our concept of Radin Yonkopon is both feminine and masculine. You understand? So obviously what they're telling you is that this is not the same thing. Because for their concept, they don't have this feminine aspect. Because again, you have to look at the environment where they were in, where they're telling you might makes right. Only the strong survive, survival of the fittest. In their proverbs, they're telling you how they think. So if you are in a place where there's a cave, where there are very few resources, if I'm a caveman and I have a bigger club, I can hit you and take your resources. I can take your wife.
And that's why their women were always at the bottom of everything.
Exactly.
Counting women among their properties and
exactly.
With what you're saying, you said black can mean something glorious. That's what you said.
In African languages.
In African language.
Right.
But here, you're meant to understand that black is only to
Black
mourn.
sheep.
If you should wear black, that means you are mourning. You should wear black to a party. People will look at you in a weird
do you
way.
have
Like,
funeral. So
Here we are.
personally, you.
Here we are in southern Ghana. You understand? So again, in southern Ghana, you can still see vestiges of this idea that black may be seen as something that's honored or esteemed. So if you have a blackened stool, it's something good, right?
Okay, let me announce that if you listen and you have any question or contribution, you can call us right now. We have just about 10 minutes to leave the doctor to go out of the studios today. So if you can call 024-7785-96, 024-7785-96. This is Deep Thoughts, and you can get it anywhere unless you tune into S Live Africa. Yes, so you can call. The number is 024-7785-96, 024. Shortly after we are done with Dr. Obadele Kambon, we're going to look at autism, how to live with autistic children and all of that. Our dear sister is in the studio to talk more about that today, so don't worry, stay tuned. Yeah, so Doc, let's be wrapping up about this equal sign.
so in general, black is not what we are made to believe it is. The color black.
Yeah.
Exactly. This is the point. So if you go to ancient Kemet, right, the name of the land was Kemet. It means land of black people. The people themselves called themselves Kemetiu, which means black people. Now also the root word of both of those is Kem. And in that root word you have the concept of that which is complete, that which is perfect. It's very much like that story of the hyena. If you want the one that's complete, the one that's not going to fade. Because if you add all these different colors together, picture you have paint. If you want to add all of these different paints together, you can start off with white paint, add in yellow, add in brown, add in red, add in purple, add in green, add in every color that you have. You'll get this deeper color, this dark black color. And the idea is that once you get to the complete, once you get to that which is perfect, that's when you have blackness. And that's how the divinity Asar was seen, as the divinity of perfect black, right? So this is our indigenous African concept. And a scholar named Ranoko Rashidi, he says the same thing existed in India among the black people there. A lot of people don't know that India has black people. Many are blacker than yourself. So you are an indigenous, Ghanaian, but there, even to this day, you have people who are blacker than any Ghanaian you will ever see. Now, in the writings of, Marco Polo, he's reported as saying that if you go to India, all of their gods, all of their divinities, this is again his words, I don't like the term God for obvious reasons, he says all of their gods are black and all of their demons are white, right? And this was the concept throughout the world.
Whoa.
Right? That whatever is black is divine, is complete, is perfect. You always had those concepts always linked together, and whatever is the opposite is not. And if you go to Dogon land, they talk about the pale fox, which formed from Ogo. The pale fox is called Yurugu. And they say that in creation there was this incomplete being named Ogo, and Ogo wanted to get its twin early, so it burst out of its placenta, and the creator Ama, again coming to the same thing, the creator Ama turned that placenta into the earth. But because this pale fox, this Ogo, wanted to dig in, that this was considered to be incest, and it transformed it into this white pale fox. You understand? So the idea is that which is white is not seen as being perfect and pure and so forth and so on. However, these are seen as complementary opposites, because by the same token, the pale fox is not seen as being intrinsically evil, because matter of fact, they look at the footsteps of this pale fox in order to do divination. You understand? Anytime you would have a divinity or being like Seteth, so Seteth was seen as the killer of Asar, right? Who cut the body up into these pieces and tried to usurp the throne and, you know, basically make Isfet, this is chaos, reign. But at the same token, Seth was not seen as the devil, as being evil, because by the same token, you see this Seth on the front of the solar bark defending Ra, the sun from Ipepi, which was his adversary, which was depicted as a snake. So it means that Seth, even though he did something wrong, this is morality of conduct, not morality of being. It's not that you are intrinsically evil all the time, but that's the concept of Eurasian thought, that the devil is bad, evil all the time. However, if the creator is omniscient and omnipresent, now omnipresent, it means present at every single place. This means that if your divinity, your so-called God, is omnipresent, this means that God must be living in hell too. You understand? This means that God must be inside of the heart of your so-called devil. You understand? Otherwise, you're not omnipresent. This means that you go all the way into the earth, but then at a certain point you stop being there.
Whoa. Wow.
But these are the problems when you have Manichean thought, this dualistic thought where one thing is good all the time, the other thing is bad all the time. You understand? And that's not the African concept, because at some point in time over our millions of years on the planet, we realized the inherent flaws in that type of thinking. And there was actually a religion called Manicheanism. This is what we refer to it now as Manicheanism. And there was a so-called scholar in Iran, a sage called Mani, and he said that all of these things, anything in the world, you can see that one thing is light and that's good, and its opposite is dark and that's bad. So he always put things in those types of terms, where one thing is good, the opposite is bad. I'm actually having a conversation with an elder where he's saying, okay, one form of government of African people, kingship, is evil all the time, and egalitarianism, you know, acephalous societies are good all the time. And my qualm with him isn't with egalitarianism. My qualm is that he's following this Manichean thought, you understand, where one thing is good and its opposite is evil all the time. And, you know, just for him to even understand that this is part of this Eurasian trend of worldview. Now, you can have African people doing it because he's African and he's doing it. However, if you look at the trends of how African people tend to think about these things and how Eurasians tend to think of these things, you'll see that they don't mesh so well, right? So these are some of the things to think of. Now, I also want to introduce the term Nana, also as ancestors. So most people say, oh, Nana, that means chief. We've already gone into the problems with the term chief. But if you look at this, one thing that gets lost if you translate Nana as ancestor is that Nana, you can refer to that as both your grandparent, also your grandchild. Now this is very profound, because if we look at something like this, and we've introduced this before, this is Dikenga. This circle here, this is Dikenga. And this represents birth, right? This represents birth. Then the sun, it also represents the sunrise. This represents when you are at your highest point, you're an adult. It also represents when the sun is at noon. Then this point here represents sunset, right? It also represents death or transition. And then this represents conception. And this is among the Bakongo people, they call this Dikenga. This circle here, they call it Dikenga. And they say nothing exists that doesn't follow these steps of Dikenga. They say everything has its conception, whether it's an idea, whether it's a nation, whether it's a human being, whatever. It has a conception, it's eventually born, it comes to its high point, it eventually gets weaker and transitions, and then comes back to conception. Now, when you say Nana, and Nana can be both grandparent and grandchild, so someone who's 90 years old can say, oh, Menana, and they're referring to their grandchild. Someone who's 8 years old can say Menana, and they're referring to their grandparent, right? And both is the same exact word. What is what's encapsulated in that idea is this idea of the cycle. And this is also why you would have the elder who would traditionally do the naming of the naming ceremony, because this elder who is about to transition is one who's in the best position to recognize their own grandparent when they reincarnate. Now,
I think next week that's a topic we're going to discuss, because a lot of people send me questions about that reincarnation. What exactly is it? When somebody is back, how would you be able to know this person has? Would somebody like myself be able to know that I've been here before? So that's what we're going to talk about
no problem.
next week. Right now our time is really, really tight, so I'll let you give your final words, then we depart from the studios, so that next week I hope you can get here early, and we'll look at reincarnation.
No problem.
But today's topic is too deep. It's too deep.
I hope people got something from it.
Yeah.
Because the point isn't for me to say, "Oh, I'm so deep." The point is to break it down so people can understand.
Exactly. Because when I saw the topic on Abibitumi this morning, I was like, "What is wrong with the equal sign?"
Right.
If I equal God to Onyame, what's wrong with that? But that's
I'm happy he clarified the black. My favorite color is black, and each time you say you have black, people tend to look at you in a weird way.
Yeah. So what do you wear to funerals?
When I go to funerals, I don't always go to funerals, but usually I'll wear a cloth. I'll usually wear an Adinkra cloth. So I actually went to a funeral, and they said, "Okay, you should wear this, you should wear that." We went to a funeral and we were wearing white. We have the white background, and then it has the black checks inside. So they were looking at us, because sometimes they'll allow it. They'll say, "Oh, if it's an older person, then they'll do it like that." But that's what I wore. Now, when I was installed, interestingly, which is a time of celebration, I was wearing black. You can actually see my installment video, where before the installment I was actually wearing this exact same thing. I had this white that has the black inside of it. That's before the installment. Then when I was installed, I wore the black cloth. You understand? So this is the celebration. But again, this is part of the idea that these were seen as complementary opposites. So it's not that one thing is good and the opposite is evil all the time. Because at the same time I was wearing the black cloth, then they put the white powder on me. And again, if you look at birth is represented as black, and then death is represented as white, right? But they're not seen as this is bad all the time, this is good all the time. They're seen as being complementary parts of a whole. If you have this and you don't have that, then it's incomplete.
All right, Doc. I think we'll end it here, and I'll come back next week. Any question that comes, I'll write them down so that we talk about that. Thank you very much for coming. Bennett, do you have anything to say to Doc?
No, just thank you for the
education.
Too much sauce. Yes, too much sauce.
No problem.
All right, so thank you very much. The show is still on.
Anywhere to get the.
And I also wanted to say, in the X Live interviews and information section at Abibitumi, you go to the groups and then you click in there. I've posted the etymologies of the words that we've touched on, and then also the full video, I'll post it there. So anyone who wants to go back, if it was quite a lot,
Doc actually
come back.
owns a black website, social media, whatever you can call it. It's called Abibitumi. You can go there, you can video chat, everything over there. So let's also go there, and that's our own. All right, so we'll be right back to talk about autism.